Good morning, you guys. And President Biden, during those remarks, called this an act of sheer evil. At the time, he said there had been 14 Americans dead, at least 20 unaccounted for, and that Americans were among those taken hostage by Hamas. I'm standing here today with NSC Director of Communications, Admiral John Kirby. Thank you so much for joining us here at Scripps News. I just would like to get an update first on those numbers, if you would.
Well, I don't have an update for you this morning. Obviously, we're in touch with our embassy as well as Israeli officials. I do think that later today we'll have an update on the numbers. And sadly, I think we all need to be prepared for the fact that those numbers are gonna increase again today in terms of Americans who are dead and potentially even those Americans who are missing. They don't know for sure, but we all need to prepare ourselves for that.
If that number of American hostages increases, the number of American dead increases, will this deterrent strategy the administration's taken with the movement of the naval fleet, with the increasing posture with the Air Force, change in any way?
I don't know of any force posture changes that would come as a result of the change in numbers. I think it's important to remember that the reason why additional forces were put in the region was to deter any other actors who might be interested in trying to expand or widen this conflict, other terrorist groups or other nation states. That's really what that's all about.
Have there been any security challenges when it comes to those deterrence strategies? Are you concerned that other actors are preparing to, as the administration has said, take advantage of the situation?
Well, look, we've heard some worrisome rhetoric coming out of Hezbollah in Lebanon, but so far we haven't seen any evidence that they're willing to really weigh in here and demonstrably support what Hamas is doing down in Gaza. So that's really kind of where things are right now.
Okay, and I'd like to move over to some of the Egypt request for a ceasefire. I know we've been in communication with our partners in Egypt as well. Where do those talks stand?
And I'd refer you to Egyptian authorities and Israeli officials. What we're focused on is making sure that Israel has the tools and capabilities it needs to go after these Hamas terrorists and to defend themselves in these early days, of course. And so you probably saw the Israelis announce the first installment of military aid arrive today. That's a good thing. I'm sure there will be more coming here in coming days.
Do you know when those additional reinforcements will arrive?
Not now. And obviously we're going to leave it to the Israelis to speak to that.
Do you have any update on conversations with members of Congress detailing that funding request the president outlined yesterday during his remarks?
We are having routine consultations and conversations with members of Congress, including today up on Capitol Hill, to talk about what we're doing, how we're supporting Israel, and also what the funding package would look like if we need more supplemental funding. You heard the president talk about that yesterday. That's very likely we will. And so we're starting to have those conversations again, even this morning.
How quickly do you think that supplemental funding will be needed? How long do we have for the current amount that is there?
That's a great question. We have existing authorities and existing appropriations to support Israel, but we don't know how long this conflict's going to last. We also don't know exactly what their expenditure rate for munitions is going to be. So the sooner we can lock in some supplemental funding, the better it'll be for the people of Israel, for the Israeli Defense Forces, so that there won't be a gap. There won't have to be any worry about how they expend rounds. They'll know that more are coming. So obviously, as we continue to have these conversations with Congress, we're going to want to see them move as quickly as possible.
How concerned are you, though, without a House Speaker, that funding will get held up? Have you had conversations about a workaround?
Well, look, that's really for the House Republicans to speak to their leadership issues. Obviously, we need a Speaker of the House, and as soon as possible. Now, the Speaker pro tem has some authorities, and we do know that we have strong bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, which is a good thing. But obviously, we need a strong partner in Congress, in the House, to be able to move this funding forward.
Okay, now speaking of a different partner, I want to come back to Egypt and ensuring safe passage for Americans and other civilians out of Gaza. We know administration officials have spoken to that. Where do those efforts stand?
We are working with Egypt and partners to see that we can make sure there are safe ground routes out of Gaza. So those conversations are ongoing. We know how important that is, and we're working at that very, very hard. I don't have any announcements to make or the end of negotiations to talk about, but we are actively engaged in those conversations.
And humanitarian aid, can you speak to any efforts in that realm?
We still believe it's important for humanitarian assistance to get to the people of Gaza. Gaza, and that's our intention to be able to find ways to keep that humanitarian assistance flowing.
Okay, and finally, Admiral, I know you have a lot going on today, obviously. We've heard from sources that globally they're recommending Israeli and Jews reconsider international travel and not reveal their identity and religion. Do you have any update on that? Is that a position that the United States government plans to take?
I know of no position that we're going to take on that. That's obviously for the Israeli government to speak to. But it does hearken to something a bit broader, and you heard the president talk about this yesterday with the worries of anti-Semitism spillovers here from what's going on in Israel, even here at home. We have a large, very vibrant Jewish community here in the United States, and they need to know that they can worship and they can work and they can spend time with their families and their communities safely. Without the fear of hatred, without the fear of any violence. That's why the president directed federal law enforcement to work, and the intelligence community to work closely with state and local authorities so that we can identify and disrupt any potential threats to the Jewish community throughout the country. It's a sad truth, but anti-Semitism is on the rise around the world. You can't blame the Israeli government. I don't know if they've actually instituted this policy, but you can't blame them for thinking about it. It's a shame that they have to, but it's a sad truth, and we have to deal with it here at home too.
Speaking of that threat here at home, are there any active threats that Americans should be cognizant or aware of?
I have no specific threats to specific places or communities to speak to today, but it is a prudent step. It's the responsible thing to do, given the rise of anti-Semitism, even here at home, for us to keep a sharp weather eye out.
Thank you, Admiral.
My pleasure.